Rethinking Heroes, Life After the Military.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
Wow, I mean, first of all, what a question.
Journalism is about telling the truth.
All while ferreting out the bottom line.
I'm a Harrison Hellraiser.
Uh-oh. With me, Carrie Harrison, as your guide.
Rethinking Heroes, Life After the Military with Carrie Harrison.
Carrie Harrison with you, Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com. Don't forget, you can get our free newsletter where you're going to get a transcript of this show and other stuff that is absolutely not possible to put on FCC-regulated airwaves. That doesn't mean porn. I know a lot of you have asked for that, but I can't seem to find the right one that makes everyone happy. So get your own. But all the cool other stuff that we simply can't include, stuff that's behind the scenes in conversations, other bits of aspects, and of course, insights and observations. So you can simply go to rethinkingheroes.com, get our free newsletter. You can also do the same thing by just signing up at Substack, keyword Rethinking Heroes. Well, Donald Trump's legal issues will be fought on two distinct fronts, right? Neither of which he can afford to lose. First, the courtrooms, and then perhaps even more importantly, the realm of the Republican independent public opinion. Yes, what would be called voters, if there are any such things left actually still alive that think that it even matters, but in that court of opinion. If Mr. Trump loses, either his career as a politician is over. That's what they're saying. If he loses, his career as a politician is over. I say BS, because that's what we're all being told. Much like P.T. Barnum, the more bearded ladies you have under your tent, the bigger the crowd. At Ringling Brothers used to winter north of Sarasota in Florida, and routinely there were custody battles over the offspring of the lobster boy and any of his girlfriends. This was in the newspaper. Did it hurt the circus? Oh, no. Did it diminish the amount of attendees? Oh, no. Did it become a sermon in the local Baptist church? Hell no. In fact, it sold more newspapers, increased TV ratings, and exploded attendance for the circus. So the bigger the circus, the bigger the success. Count on it. You know it. You've seen it with your eyes. Please, please don't go into denial. It's bad enough. Many well-meaning people seem to think that their table manners are the table manners of their neighbors. Well, I'm just appalled by this. Everyone will just say, no, it's bad, and it'll all go away. Really? Something so outrageous would immediately be dismissed by the tasteful and discriminating American public, the same public that rides around like hippopotami in electric buggies at Walmart. Think deep for once, huh? Sure, it's true Donald Trump would try to control the discourse around his indictments, as well as the effective tools known as TV and radio and print. And let's not forget social media, larger than all three combined. 800. Well, I'm going to actually, the number, it depends where you live, but let's just say most of Earth, about 800 billion. Is distortion and disinformation illegal when it comes from a president or former president? Well, no, not according to Richard Milhous Nixon, who I am thrilled to be able to quote twice a year. And over the past 40 years of Orwellian, Huxleyan eye-rolling, whether you're Larry Craig sitting in the airport toilet with a wide stance, tapping your foot 3 whole times for the cop in the adjoining stall, or the great catch me if you can Congressman George Santos, disinformation, BS, huckstering, and doublespeak is always going to be the cut-through language in the coming trials and election cycle to follow. Count on it. You've been watching it. Don't pretend you're shocked and appalled that people aren't doing what you think they ought to be doing. In a moment, I'm going to bring on one of the greatest legal minds, whom I am lucky to know as a personal friend. He's going to help us break down what the Constitution actually says about all of this. And doesn't it matter? Or does it matter whether Donald Trump or Donald Duck or Donald O'Connor, rest in peace? What matters is that the founding fathers, my direct ancestors, never envisioned a presidential candidate swinging in a gibbet like the pirates in a cage with the birds pecking at his eyeballs, with ankle bracelets, later being dragged into the White House where he can eat salmon and enjoy a nice tooth bleaching, all at the taxpayer's expense in the House of Washington, Jefferson, and Adams. What does this really mean? Reality is what we're going to deal with today, rather than opinion, appetite, and hope. Forget hope. Go to church if you want hope. This is the real world. One of the primary tactics of disinformation is repetition. We've seen it throughout history, most remarkably through the mouthpiece of Dr. Joseph Goebbels, who learned everything uniquely from an American, Edward L. Bernays. But history is inconvenient, Nikki, so I'll try to avoid it for at least 20 seconds. We're going to have a cognitive bias, all of us humans, called the illusory truth effect. The more we hear a false statement, the more likely we are to believe it to be true. On the other hand, this also works for truth. The more we say the truth, the more credible it becomes. Repeating facts is vitally important. Sometimes we call this school. Whether you're watching Fox, Newsmax, MSNBC, or CNN, I think we all agree that a distinction needs to be made between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is unknowingly spreading incorrect news. Disinformation is when you do it on purpose. Most modern-day American politicians, including Donald Trump, who is a masterclass communicator, they're going to save their skin. Will it be a massive disinformation, misinformation, or wholesome Christian truth campaign? How do we even know what anyone is actually allowed to do? Because at the end of the day, it's the law that matters, not the hair and makeup or the obsession that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has with naked men, or the obsession he has with drag queens and other things that the average person playing golf pays zero attention to and never wants to hear about. Well, we're going to explore information, more importantly, what the law says about who our presidents are allowed to be. Allowed to be. We'll look at the series of indictments, which put Donald Trump squarely within the setting of the alleged truth-telling evidential framework of the American legal system. And it's true that Trump and his allies want to make it sound like all the indictments are part of a political plot against him. But are they? Maybe they are. Maybe they're not. We can't fall for the red herring that the fight against disinformation is some sort of censorship or an assault on free speech. None of us likes being censored. We don't like being canceled. We don't like to be told to shut up or that our pimples are beautiful. We'd much rather know we have a giant squid in the middle of our forehead ready to explode, and that we ought to be well advised to step into the restroom and handle that imminently exploding octopus above our eyes. We are grateful for that. Not, oh, God, that's beautiful. I'm going to step over here because when it explodes, well, I didn't bring a raincoat. Wrong answer. The primary way to fight disinformation is to stop its amplification. But is refusing to amplify someone else's disinformation censorship? Well, it depends on whether it's free or paid platform. If it's a regulated utility like a phone where you can do and say anything you want, or someone else's social media platform they let you on for free, basically it's their front lawn and they can kick you the hell off when they feel like it. And that includes Twitter, that includes Facebook. You don't own it. You don't pay for it. You could do whatever they can say and do whatever they want. So don't complain, please. That's if we really, really value private property as much as we say so. If we do, we would never complain about YouTube, Twitter, anybody censoring us because it's private property and you don't pay to be on there. But when you do pay, like the phone company, a regulated utility, you get to say whatever you want and they can't say no. Then many people are thinking, is it censorship for you to refuse to hand out flyers at a Ku Klux Klan rally? Well, yeah, it is a form of censorship, personal censorship, but it's also a form of free speech. See how complicated it is? Now you're going to have to think. So with me, speaking of thinkers, thinking of a capacious brain, so gargantuan, so filled with firing dendrites and beautiful synapses. I mean, we're talking a giant, the size of a sperm whale. This brain is so beautiful, and it's filled with humor and perspective. This is what a good brain looks like. You're about to witness it. Lionel, acclaimed New York attorney, media savant, humorist, host of Lionel Nation on YouTube. It's live twice daily. There's energy for you. Plus scads of video disquisitions and perorations, anent and regarding that which is critical and yet oft ignored. If society is to collapse in flames, let it be with panache, he says. Embrace your inner flaneur. And I could say flaneur because I am in Paris, France right now, where we are doing the show live. Lionel, I want to welcome you to Rethinking Heroes.
Thank you so much, my dear friend. Anybody who can bring up Grady Stiles, Electrodactyly, and Lobster Boy, and purulent pustules within this incredible, this word souffle. I am so indeed honored. Let's get down to brass tacks regarding Donald Trump, so that people will know this. Donald Trump is not being indicted for merely saying or thinking that his election was stolen. That's absurd. That's what people are saying. And it's not misinformation, disinformation, or my favorite, dat information, which is even rarer.
Yeah.
No, this is just right-wing lunacy versus left-wing lunacy. No, that's not it. They're saying that he did a little bit more than that, and that remains to be seen. So the first issue is, what is it precisely that he's being charged with, and in which case? I find this last case involving the notion of a criminal enterprise, that's absurd. That's absurd. Here's the deal. If you and I join the Gambino crime family, we enlist them to allow us in. We are made, straightened out, get our badge. We act in concert to support the Gambino crime family.
Did you say get our badge?
Not just each other.
Yes,
our badge. That is New York downtown parlance. Straightened out, get your badge, whatever. So that's different. What they're claiming is that people like Sound the Kraken or Release the Kraken, City Powell and others were doing things in order to further a criminal racketeering enterprise. That's absurd. What they might have been doing was wrong. So that notwithstanding. But what Fani Willis is saying, which is interesting, is there is a couple of Georgia statutes that are, dare I say, more granular. And when you look at them, they will indeed pose a problem if indeed proven. Remember something. It is the rarest of rare cases where somebody is charged with something where there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that exists. And you may say, this is the most unfair thing we've ever seen in your life. Stacey Abrams did this. Hillary Clinton, bleach pit, that's fine. If a police officer pulls you over for going 31 miles an hour in a 30, that is tawdry and needless. I was always chicken something, and it's wrong. However, it's legal. And if they charge you 100 times, if a traffic judge sees 100 times you've been charged, but you were going 31, is it a waste of time? Yes. Is it legal? Yes. Now, you ask the question, can a president, let's assume he's indicted, let's assume he's convicted, let's assume he's incarcerated, in an actual cell, forget ankle bracelets and community control and all this
and
stuff.
Gibbets.
Could he indeed, gibbets and versus giblets, which is a different concept altogether.
Yes.
But let's assume that he were to be. The answer is he doesn't. He could serve. Everybody knows Eugene V. Debs in 1920, who was incarcerated by Wilson. He ran and got 1 million votes and could very well have been in prison, could have remained in prison, could have somehow done his Article 2 duties while in the Pokey, the Hooskow, the Gray Bar Inn, the Big House. He could have done that. It may seem ridiculous. By the way, Warren Gamaliel Harding was the one who actually pardoned him later on. But here's the reason why.
I did afternoons on a talk radio station in New York, WEVD, which was bought by Disney and turned to sports.
Eugene.
Yes.
Right, Eugene V. Debs. Yes, indeed.
A socialist.
Now, what's interesting is that the founders, the drafters of the Constitution did not want and think about this, this makes sense, for the disqualification of a president to happen merely because he was charged with something, because that means everybody's going to be charged. Guaranteed. Oh, you don't like the election? Charge him. Get rid of him. So they wanted to make a two-step process: impeachment, conviction, and then prosecution. But under Article 2 of the Constitution, it merely says 35 years old, 14-year continuous resident, natural-born citizen. That's it. Now, whether that's practical, who knows? It's another story. What's interesting, though, is you brought up something you brought up the Grady Stiles Lobster Boy reference. Only in America, at least now, could being charged repeatedly with multiple felonies increase your popularity within the Republican Party? The law and order. And people think most mistakenly that I'm a Republican. I am not. I am a rabid, wild-eyed independent. I'm crazed. I'm so radicalized. No, not at all. But here's the thing. And let me just leave you with this because I don't know how we're doing on time. If you're going to charge somebody with something, you want to be charged with something that you could put on a bumper sticker. Harrison killed a nun. That's it. Whoa. Harrison robbed the liquor store. Harrison robbed, you killed, you manhandled a nun. You microwaved a kitten. It's like, oh my God. You don't want to be charged with Harrison took a payment made to a chanteuse that was provided and funneled through a Michael Cohen and then no, right. That's you lost me right there. You don't want to say that Harrison, upon leaving took some papers with him that were not under the presidential. However, he did it, but they weren't his. No, we don't want that. And the Jack Smith, Harrison defrauded the country by daring to attempt to. No, you don't want that. You want something that's real simple. Something like what they're accusing Hunter Biden of doing, if true. That's easy. You paid here.
Yeah, using a PC Biden instead of a Mac.
Yeah. Well, give me the money. I will pay. Something like that. Whatever. That at least I can understand whether it's true or not. That's got some meat to it. The American
Even
public
though he's not a member of
the
government, so it's an entirely different. And he's not Stephen Smith eating Pop-Tarts.
Even though his father was vice president and was a member and could very well be still continue.
We can argue that's the part that's troubling.
Yeah. Yeah, but still though, that's easy to understand, irrespective of this. Now, let me just tell me when I got to go, because here's what you got to watch for.
We've got about the weirdest 2 minutes.
Under the weirdest of perhaps. Okay, under the weirdest of twists and turns, there might be the provision where the president could claim, I don't know, that he was acting under color of title of president and could have his case removed to federal court in the Northern District of Georgia, thus leaving this prosecutor without the ability to do so. I believe Mark Eastman and others are going to be moving the court to sever their case from other defendants. So you've got 19 potential co-defendants with 19 potential series of multiple motions to separate and sever. Because remember, if we're all charged with something, I want to be away from you. I want to be, especially if I'm a minor actor, I want to be away from you. I don't want to have your activities and mine in any way commingled. So this is going to be a pre-trial monster. And you also have individuals who are now turning to President Trump and saying, could you please help me? I can't afford this. The worst of which seems to be Rudy Giuliani, who is just, they're coming at him left and right. And there are a lot of people, specifically of the organized crime persuasion, who are not the least bit saddened by that. So it remains to be seen. And here's the thing, and the last thing, if somebody could please advise President Trump, or anybody for that matter, if you're running for president or you're being charged, do not insult the prosecutor. If you're running for president, give people a vision. What are you going to do? Why should I vote for you? We all know you. It's like the Kerry Lake spiel. We understand. Yes, you lost the election. Yes, we understand it. Anything new, please? No, it's the same old song and dance. So politically is one thing, legally is another. So this remains to be seen, as they say. But I think the good news is this is at the end of this arc of prosecution. And I think it's done, at least for the time being. Let's see what happens next, my dear and great friend.
This was a fantastic primer into things to come, and also you laid it out in a way completely understandable for the average person. Important to note that Trump has not been convicted of any crimes, presumed innocent until proven guilty in this country, as is everyone else. However, the indictments are a serious matter. They will or could have far-reaching consequences, so it will be interesting to see how the case unfolds. But the ultimate outcome is. I want to thank you, Lionel, acclaimed New York attorney, media savant, a humorist, host of Lionel Nation on YouTube, live twice daily, plus scads of video disquisitions, perorations, anent, and regarding that which is critical yet oft ignored, actually generally ignored. If society is to collapse in flames, let it be with panache, he says, and embrace your inner flaneur, which I am doing from Paris live today. I thank you, my brother, from the bottom of my heart, and have a fabulous day.
Indeed. Thank you, sir.
All right, my friend. Carrie Harrison here with you. This is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com. In just a moment, we have found a man brave. He had to be in another country, it turns out. But he is bringing forth issues about 9/11 that you have thought about, that you have read about, that you have considered, but you have not been allowed to talk about it. And no U.S. press has been allowed to discuss these subjects. He's put together a book of over 400 pages that lays out the most exquisite pathway. You're going to want it as not only your personal history book, but the directions of how to pull off one hell of a crime. Meanwhile, American families are wishing to sue, to talking to the Saudis. They are blocked. They are forbidden. Why? Why? All the whys. Many of them will be answered in just a tick.
Listen while it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Carrie Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
All right. Carrie Harrison with you. Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com, where you can get our free favorite price newsletter. And you can also go to Substack and just look for Rethinking Heroes. And we're going to give you transcripts of this stuff and other things that we simply cannot do on the radio. Lots of extra bells and whistles. Why? Because you deserve it. Imagine radio telling it likes its listeners. That's me. That's always going to be the way. Well, anyone interested in social justice and human suffering, social accountability in the present and future, you're going to find this next segment interesting. As we hover around yet another milestone anniversary, the dynamic has changed. We are now allowed to ask if it's possible that the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon were covered up. Just barely allowed anyway. Covered up like the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. Even the associate editor of the Wall Street Journal, whose name is Paul Craig Roberts, even the associate editor of the Wall Street Journal says, quote, "We cannot let the government get away with its implausible and unbelievable explanations." Roberts also happened to serve as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy under President Ronald Reagan, and is hardly being politically correct. So we're going to do a deep dive into a 425-page book which reveals the crime that changed America forever. And I mean forever. Who can forget the Patriot Act? Who can forget on TV color codes? How safe is it to go outside? We're still living in that moment. Surveillance state. I could go on. I won't. You already know it. We can all agree that our faith in the great American experiment was shaken to its foundation by this event, and this is probably the event that caused most Americans to seriously doubt the honesty of their government authorities. Who can forget Swingin' Dick Cheney talking quite literally out of the side of his mouth, quite literally, or W, whose malaprops were so legend that this top DJ made this most beautiful remix.
Satellite radio broadcast, a new radio broadcast system. Here's my mix. Good evening. I'm George W. Bush, President of the United States. I'm so pleased to be working with Senator Clinton. She is a fabulous woman.
Thank you, President Bush. As you know better than most, as all of us know, we must say nuclear.
Seriously.
Seriously. Obviously.
No doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt in my mind.
No doubt.
Nuestros hermanos y hermanas. Ame al prójimo como a sí mismo. Love your neighbor like you'd like to be loved yourself.
With great frequency and vigor.
Como a sí mismo. It's a universal call. Como a sí mismo. It's a universal love. We should have done this 4 years ago. What? Amazing, isn't it? Que Dios le bendiga. Como a sí mismo. People try to put us down. People like you and me. I don't think so, Bill. Just because we get around.
Welcome to Washington. Goes with the territory.
Things they do look awfully old. I seriously suggest you go to Chicago. We have got to work together poppycock to eradicate poppycock, And as a matter of fact, I'd call it crap. Crap? Huh? I wouldn't call it crap. Crap? Yeah, crap. Oh my goodness, what's going on? Blow the whistle. We have a problem. Poppycock. You're in control of your life, not the government. The government not dictating, what how you do things. You are.
This critical time, in this complicated situation we find ourselves in, let us be unequivocally clear. If we allow this dehumanizing rhetoric to go unchallenged, it can spread, and it can take young minds and twist and pervert them. That infection is contagious. And it can spread.
Kind of like a dog chasing your tail. Stop. That's a cheap shot.
It has to end now.
Let me finish. If I were to ever say wrong war, wrong place, wrong time, wrong war at the wrong place at the wrong time, wrong war at the wrong war, wrong place, wrong time, wrong war at the wrong place at the wrong time, wrong war at the wrong time at the wrong place, wrong war at the wrong time at the wrong place, the wrong war at the wrong place, wrong war, wrong time, wrong place, wrong war, wrong time, wrong place, it's the wrong war at the wrong time at the wrong place. You would have had trouble containing yourself from laughing out loud at the president. It's a sad situation. Too much poppycock here in Washington, D.C. Poppycock. Disassemble. Is that the verb you used? Disassemble. That means not tell the truth. Give the man a lot. I got a hop. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Ciao.
That brought back a flashback I may never be able to purge, but at least we were able to laugh at the oafishness of that cruel president who now looks like a statesman compared to the alternatives seeking or occupying the White House. Carrie Harrison with you. This is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com. But back to the turbulent period marked by terrorist attacks and suicide bombings. The world's economy collapsed. A pandemic raged for 2 years. And if you've ever wondered where the impetus for the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq come from, a book called Unanswered Questions is the book for you. It took an investigative reporter and a theologian to uncover the unfiltered truth. Truth? Yes, truth with an F. When challenged about the wars that were fought during his presidency, former President George W. Bush avoids taking responsibility. More than 22 years have passed since the unavoidable calamity he set in motion, but he still shows no remorse and refuses to take no responsibility for his actions. His statements about weapons of mass destruction have been disproved by truth seekers of all colors and political persuasions. His uncompromising stance, in which he insisted every nation and every region now has a decision to make. It's black and white. Either you're on our side or the terrorists. Huh? About to speak with Ray McGinnis, that's who we're going to do, who points out the central question of why the United States has protected Saudi Arabia from legal action by families and loved ones of the September 11 victims for almost 2 decades. As the events played out, they left a, laughing for me, not for them, everlasting impression. The death toll still stands at 2,996 people, including the 19 hijackers who committed murder-suicide in the worst terrorist strike ever in our country. And in addition to the surviving families, thousands more were hurt, and long-term health problems affect thousands, including my twin sister, or Twister, from the first responders to people like her living in Lower Manhattan who sucked on that air for well over a year, and we all know what was in it. In 2020, then Attorney General William Barr and then Acting Director of National Intelligence Richard Grenell claimed that disclosing any information about, quote, Saudi connections to the destruction of the Twin Towers, the attack on the Pentagon, would threaten national security, and that the very justification for keeping such information secret would be needed to keep under wraps. Attorney General William Barr, and we've seen him in his sexiest in the past 4 years, told the judge that disclosing the materials, quote, you'll love this, would reveal information that could harm state secrets. State secrets? Now there's a term you don't hear in a democracy. Let's just jump right on into it. Introduce Ray McGinnis, who did a deep dive into the questions raised by the Family Steering Committee for the 9/11 Independent Commission. It took a Canadian, not blocked by the U.S. government, to search for information that led him to uncover more open source material and the range of views among September 11th family members. It has led him to reflect on what it means to live in a post 9/11 world and the narratives that we trust. Here we are hovering around that anniversary again. Ray McGinnis is also known for investigating the justification for the Trudeau government's invocation of the Emergencies Act on Valentine's Day of 2022. And his writings across Canada have restored faith in journalism amongst our northern friends. Ray McGinnis, I want to welcome you to Rethinking Heroes.
Great to be with you, Kerry. Good to speak with you.
I am glad you're here, and I'm glad to learn what you are about to tell us. We all know much of the backstory here, but let's take a peek at the central focus of your book, Unanswered Questions, the obstruction of the United States government. By doing that, they're still seeking to prevent the 9/11 families from having their day in court with Saudi Arabia and certain Saudi officials, and that still baffles the survivors of these 9/11 families. Walk us through that, if you would.
So here we are, nearly 22 years after the attacks, and you've got families that would like to have a day in court. Remember that after the commission report came out, people like Lori Van Auken and others on the Family Steering Committee for the 9/11 Independent Commission who were monitoring the commission said that when they read the report, it left them with even more questions than they had before the commission began to do its investigation. And when you talk about what William Barr was saying regarding state secrets, the claim is all the more mysterious since the matter in question concerns two Saudis, one Los Angeles consulate official and another an alleged Saudi spy living undercover as an exchange student in San Diego. And the involvement of these two Saudi nationals with several of the alleged hijackers is already detailed in the 9/11 Commission report. So all of that is already public information. So in light of all of that, the families want to know, in what way does Attorney General William Barr mean that national security would be imperiled? How could the details of possible Saudi complicity in the attacks of September 11th embarrass the United States government, or worse, harm the nation? It just doesn't add up to them.
It seems to me, Ray McGinnis, that if you rob a jewelry store, any town USA, the cops want to know the motive. They take fingerprints and they go after it. This is more than a jewel heist. It is a slaughter. Multiple multi-billion-dollar aircraft brought down, the entire stock exchange devastated, a whole economy switched, and not one cop wants to take one fingerprint. And even though we've had these sort of circus show and tells, and we know exactly, precisely the names, we have photos, we know who did what and almost who paid for it, and yet we're not allowed to ask. But in Canada, I guess it seems a little different from you. You're not called a communist or a bad person or, whatever. Like somehow you felt able to do it, whereas here we will be shot if we ask questions.
Well, I came upon this after I stumbled into a bookstore one time reading Kristen Breitweiser's memoir, Wake Up Call, The Political Education of a 9/11 Widow. Her husband, Ron, died in the South Tower. And I read that in 2007. And up in Canada, the focus has been entirely in the news. It's been all about the sad stories and the obituaries and the remembrances, and nothing about the important grassroots advocacy of these families. And I remember watching the 9/11 Commission when Richard Clarke, the counterterrorism czar, testified, and he said before the commission and all the families gathered there in the audience, your government failed you and I failed you. And I remember being impressed with that. And I remember the families went to the press and said, thank you, Richard Clarke, at least somebody in government is saying we blew it, and so on. But what I didn't know at the time, until more recently, was that Richard Clarke was close friends with a number of United Arab Emirates royal family members. One of them, a defense minister, who often went on bird hunting with Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. And in 1999, in both February and March, he tipped off the United Arab Emirates royals to let bin Laden know that the CIA agents in the field were about to apprehend him so that bin Laden could get the slip. Now, this is kind of close to the official story and so on, with both Republican-leaning and Democrat and independent-leaning families that maybe accept some of the official account. But even on the face of the official account, all of this kind of behavior, how is it possible that the counterterrorism czar, who's responsible for combating terrorism and keeping the nation safe, when bin Laden at that time was already wanted for bombings of embassies in Tanzania and Kenya, is being given a word passed on to prevent CIA from apprehending him to answer charges the government has.
Interesting, Ray McGinnis. I have a friend who is a Marine who was 6 months in Afghanistan and Kuwait before Saddam Hussein had done the dogleg drilling for oil and any of this happened. And they literally choreographed and rehearsed even what we would call in the movie industry in LA, craft services, bringing in the food. They literally had rehearsed and memorized how you get off a plane, how many steps, turn here, build the tent. And he watched and talks about how CNN showed up. They built a berm. They literally timed out the first of the missiles to go live with CNN. The entire thing choreographed. Let me reintroduce you right now, Ray McGinnis, here on Rethinking Heroes. He's done a deep dive into the questions raised by the Family Steering Committee for the 9 Independent Commission. Took a Canadian not blocked by the U.S. government to search for information that led him to uncover more open source material and the range of views among September 11th family members. If you're an American, if you can relate to a family member that's not only been aggrieved where people have been murdered and you're not allowed to look in it, and you think, but that's what the cops and the government is supposed to do, you're scratching their head too, as you would. This has led Ray McGinnis to reflect on what it means to live in a post-11 world and the narratives that we trust. He's also known for investigating the justification for the Trudeau's government invocation of the Emergencies Act on Valentine's Day of 2022. And his book, which is out right here, right now for you, lays out how the government does cover-ups, how the government won't let families talk to the Saudis. Ray McGinnis, for example, how does your book explore the relationship between the United States government and Saudi Arabia in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks?
Well, it seems that the United States government is very interested in making sure that the Saudi Arabian government is shielded from having a day in court with the families in successive administrations. So this is completely confounding and baffling and maddening for the families who cannot understand. I mean, the official account where you have some unity among some families, because there are some families that want to investigate complicity within the U.S. administration. But never mind, starting with the Saudis, yet again, the government doesn't want the families and wants to protect the Saudis, give them immunity from being prosecuted. So here we are 22 years later, and that's the best the government can do.
And Ray McGinnis, to not avoid the gigantic, hairy, tusked mastodon in the middle of the room, the Saudis are useful for one thing. Under their sand is our oil. Get rid of our oil under their sand, they'd be behind bars. They wouldn't exist. They'd be gone. So once again, this does loop back to who makes the money, who controls the money, who's got the money. And let's talk quickly, Ray McGinnis, what role does ex-President George W. Bush play in the narrative? In your book, Unanswered Questions, 425 pages, I believe. It is a thick tome. You're going to want to read it because it explains to you how we conduct wars and how we end up winning them, even if we don't, because it's kind of rigged. But you need to know how this works, because it works the same way in your life with all the different branches, whether it's AT&T or anybody. It's the same mechanics that get them to the finish line and leave you wheezing and gagging in the beginning. How does George W. Bush, how does the text portray his response to the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq?
Well, I mean, when the attacks happened themselves, we all find George W. Bush, thanks to Michael Moore, who drew attention to this footage. The president was sitting in a classroom with kindergarten, with elementary school children, reading them a book about a pet goat. And the sense of the leadership in response to this terrorist attack, with the government blindsided and everything, it's almost as though psychologically all Americans and all citizens watching the president are put in the position of being elementary school students listening to "There Once Was a Pet Goat" and so on. And so we're not thinking a big picture. We're all kind of back in romper room. And so this is a dumbing down. I think it's when you've got Ari Fleischer at the back of the room with a sign to the president that says, "Don't say anything yet." What were they afraid he was going to say? He who
well,
says,
that's it.
I'm going to put
talk about a minister of propaganda, right?
Yeah. And then also one of the questions the families had was, how does it happen to be that the president signed a presidential directive to go to war against Afghanistan and the Taliban on the 9th of September 2001? I mean, 2 days before. I mean, why would you do that? Why would you sign that kind of directive? Did you have a heads up?
Last question for 90 seconds, Ray McGinnis. What is the significance of the contradictions in NORAD and the Pentagon's officials' testimonies regarding the military response to the hijackings as mentioned in your book?
Well, we have 7 different timelines that were offered by NORAD and the Pentagon regarding what their response was, including, we had no response at all. And then, General Myers, Richard Myers, I guess we did have a response, and here's what it was. And then they changed it 5 more times after that. So it's completely incomprehensible to the family regarding the military precision that the Pentagon is supposed to be operating on, and then to be all thumbs and putting forward 7 different incompatible timelines suggesting what they did, which cannot be the truth. And so even the 9/11 Commission wanted to consider the Department of Justice investigating the Pentagon.
So if you were to sum up your book in 45 easy seconds, what is it we walk away with?
What we walk away with is that the story we've been told cannot be true. It's a cover-up. And that in order for us to know our history, so that, if history keeps on repeating, if we don't know our history, so we need to understand that the story we've been told isn't true and that it's not good enough. And that the best way for us as ordinary citizens is to consider the questions that the families asked that remain unanswered all these years. And that's the most patriotic way to move democracy forward for the safety and well-being of the country.
Thank you, author Ray McGinnis, for saying that. And, you in Canada are affected by what we do south of you, as Donald Trump would say, bigly. So you have every reason to remain terrified, as we do, of ourselves. Carrie Harrison with you. This is Rethinking Heroes, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Rethinking Heroes with Carrie Harrison. Life after the military. RethinkingHeroes.com.